But first of all, there's an amazing variety of entrepreneurship. I like to say there's as much types of entrepreneurship. It manifests itself in as many ways as there are colors in the rainbow. You can imagine. I have a case, for example, of a Hong Kong venture set by a woman there that has no operations in Hong Kong itself. They run 250-kilometer long marathons in deserts around the world. They're growing like crazy. They run in the Atacama Desert, in the Gobi Desert, in the Mongolia Desert. If you succeed in all those three, you have the big opportunity to run in Antarctica. Turns out, did you know that Antarctica was a desert? It is. It's a desert. I didn't know that. But it turns out it doesn't have much precipitation, so you can run 250 kilometers in Antarctica. Whoopee. People pay $3,000 6 months in advance to do this. That's how she funds her business. So there's an incredible variety of entrepreneurship. It's not one thing. It's not just people with test tubes and gene sequencers down near MIT mixing things up, smelling and drinking, whatever it is they do with this stuff, packaging it, trying it on mice, killing the mice, rabbits killing rabbits, monkeys killing rabbits, and then getting FDA approval. It's not just that. There's all kinds of things. Secondly, it's everywhere. I said that already. I want to give you an example of just how ubiquitous this is. And where is he? You're going to like this one. I'm going to skip ahead. Don't look. So I'm going to skip ahead to this guy. This guy was the most amazing entrepreneur in existence. The most amazing. Unfortunately, his exit strategy was horizontal. But he developed a $7 billion business. It is in the early 1990s. If inflation adjusted, that must be like at least, they could call it Coke book. Coke book. You heard it here. It's at least as much as Zuckerberg.
So, but you missed out one line. One more dot should be met a real demand.
What?
Met a real demand also.
And he and created a demand. and created a demand. That's a very important thing about entrepreneurship is not only are we addressing demands that exist, but a lot of times we're anticipating a demand, and sometimes we're even creating it. But he was incredibly amazing. He was very innovative, too. Has anyone read? There's a great book that was written called The Accountant's Story by his brother. It came out 2 or 3 years ago. Have you read it? His brother was his accountant. I don't know if everything he says is true in there, but he details the experiments they did. I'll give you just one example of innovation. You'll love it. They had this manufacturer somewhere out in Colombia, I don't know where, but they had this village, an entire village, with an airstrip to be able to fly the planes in and fly the planes out and so on and so forth. But to fool the troops, they had these all the shacks that the workers lived in, they had wheels on them, and so they covered the runway. And when the planes needed to land, the word would get out. They'd push their shacks onto the runway. The plane would land, and they'd roll their shacks back onto the runway, so they could never know that there was an airfield here. They learned chemical processes. They could mix the cocaine. I don't know, I'm making this up, but it's true. But they could mix the cocaine inside of tires. Not they put it inside, they mixed it in the rubber. They'd send the planes with the rubber, and then in the United States had factories to extract the cocaine from the rubber out of it. Amazing distribution channels. The only little problem was that it was really antisocial. This is entrepreneurship that exists channeled in ways that were tremendously antisocial. You see that all over the place. This is an extreme example. But you see lots of the entrepreneurial spirit manifesting itself in ways that are dark. In ways that are dark or unacceptable. Don't tell me that there's no entrepreneurship in your country. Tell me that it manifests itself in ways that you may not like. But it's there. So can we create the system in which it can manifest itself? Just imagine if he had existed where he could actually succeed as an entrepreneur in a legitimate way. He'd be, I don't know if Carlos Slim is the right example, but he'd be an amazing, amazing success, and we'd be having case studies about him at the Harvard Business School, and he'd be on meeting all the presidents of the world. Did you have your hand up? No. Okay.
That means
Where
is he now?
Well, he's dead. He's horizontal. His exit was horizontal. 1992 or 93, they succeeded in killing him. Took a lot. Took a lot. He didn't die easily. So that's just an example of how this gets manifests itself. Just a couple of more. It's achievable by anyone at any age. Don't let anybody tell you that entrepreneurship is something that only kids can do. In fact, the evidence is that there's lots and lots of examples of young people forming companies, failing, succeeding, failing, and that's fantastic. I think one of the characteristics of younger people is that they are less influenced by conventional wisdom, and they have less to lose than older people. In fact, so I sometimes, like to think that there's this curve, and the older I get, the more this curve changes. But when you think about how your capabilities evolve over time as an entrepreneur, you generally speaking, over time you learn more. When you're in your 40s or 50s and you've been in the same profession, you know a lot of stuff. You know a lot, and it turns out that the people in their 40s and 50s with 10, 15 years of experience in an industry, when they actually go and start companies, their companies grow faster and larger than the companies started by the young kids, okay, on the one hand. And then, we can argue about this. I'm only right here, so I think that if you just keep getting better with age, that's right. But, some people, okay, so let's say there's a little bit of the curve. That's what happens to capabilities. But there's another curve, and that's the curve of your risk profile, your willingness to take risk. And when you're young, and you've got, as Janis Joplin, the Janis Joplin song, which I'm betraying my age probably, there's freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. So when you're young, you don't have much left to lose, and then you get married. This curve is just about risk. It doesn't mean that their life is going downhill. And, you're less risky. You have a mortgage. This is where you get a mortgage. You're paying off your school debts. Now you have a membership in the golf club. And now you're saving up your tuition for your kids, right? And now you have a lifestyle. You like to eat well and like to play golf on the weekends. So your risk profile, you have more and more to lose. And then, your kids go off to school, mortgage is getting paid off, that's fine, and so on and so forth, and ultimately, your risk profile goes back up. Now, what does that mean? It means, when those two curves come together, it means the only really, really right time to start a company is when you're 70. When you think you really have nothing left. So it's a very personal decision. The people who say do it here, do it there, do it now, do it later, they're all wrong. There's no right answer. But when you do it later, you tend to be more successful. You just do it a lot less. Did I say that? When you're older, you do it less, but you're better at it? What are we talking about? Are you still awake? Okay. Calista says, end of lecture. You're getting get out of here. Go get something to drink. Let's go get something to drink.